Were you shocked by this news? What is this doing in your world that the Fed holds rates near zero, says economy has gotten even better with pandemic worries? Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on an exciting Federal Reserve announcement day. Okay, I'm just kidding. Federal Reserve itself was not exciting because as anyone who has been fortunate enough to dig through this elaborate Wall Street scheme, I think people are increasingly realizing that what the Fed says is really entirely useless. Here they hold rates near zero. It seems like they didn't do all that much talk about tapering. Not surprising. Usually there's speculation of them, and every once in a while they do talk about it, but the tapering in and of itself is often quite rare. But fortunately, to dig into such intricate matters in today's hyperinflationary economy is David Stein of Kuya Silver. So David, great to see you back on the show as always. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Chris. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing quite well myself, and let's not hold people in suspense any further, but as someone who runs a business, David, I guess that means you are a job creator, unlike any of the American presidents that talk about job creation, because all they can do is take tax money. Yet, were you shocked by this news? What is this doing in your world that the Fed holds rates near zero, says economy has gotten even better with pandemic worries? Interesting phrasing there, especially as a student of NLP. Economy has gotten better even within pandemic worries. So maybe pandemic worries are being used to fuel this economy. I don't know. What do you think's going on here, David?
Well, I mean, I think if it just looks like they're really resistant to raise rates. It's almost like the Fed has they have a asymmetric, kind of risk reward, which is that, if they tighten and get that wrong, it's a disaster. But if they keep things loose, the consequences are lower for them. That's the way it feels, from my perspective. So they kind of err on the side of keeping, rates low. And, we can, kind of see that does seem to be starting to spur inflation. That's not good for people in general. But, I guess that's what we're living with right now.
Yeah, well, certainly is an unusual economic environment. Do you think the reason that the Fed is so resistant to raising rates is that perhaps one of the experts inside that institution realizes that if they did raise interest rates, the entire stock market bubble would plummet, similar to what we saw a glimpse of at the end of 2018?
Yeah. I mean, for a body that is supposed to be, politically independent, they do seem to make decisions that are very politically comfortable. Let's put it that way. And obviously the comfortable thing to do is to keep rates low, because then people can keep buying houses and all the other things that require low rates. And we've been, our society has been sort of, sleepwalking through this to the point where, even if rates go to, up by 2%, it could be a huge disaster for people who have mortgages, who have car loans, who have other student loans, etc. So it's it is a bit of a house of cards, but it's been that way for several years now, and they keep kicking the can down the road. I think it just really emphasizes why you need to be in precious metals, I think, and have that as a significant portion of your portfolio. We don't know when, but things are going to happen. But there certainly seem to be a lot of risks, a lot of red lights going off, and I think having precious metals as part of your portfolio is a good risk diversifier. You never know when you'll need it.
Yes, David, I hear the canaries are falling all over themselves in the silver and coal mines. Now, you mentioned the benefit of having checks and balances on, and actually some independence between the money printing and the politics. Although I guess my question is that, wasn't that all negated basically when former Fed chairwoman Janet Yellen became the Secretary of Treasury? So really, especially in today's environment where we don't have to speculate anymore that groups like the CFTC are part of the bankers' payroll. I mean, we've seen the video of them having the criminals vote on the policy, then confirming price rigging operations and refusing to address that. And it's a very similar pattern where here now you have Janet Yellen, who's gone from the Fed, where she made her own contribution to the current hyperinflation campaign, now is warning Congress about the failure to act on the debt limit, basically using that same threat that has been poised against the American people for years of how it's unpatriotic, and if we don't continue to print and spend additional money on top of the bubble that's already been created, that it's a catastrophe. Is it possible all of these are connected, or what would you say there?
Well, look, we're getting into an area where sort of beyond my expertise. Like, obviously in her new role, it should be independent of the Fed. I don't know if they still talk to each other or what what happens there behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The whole debt ceiling thing that seems to come up, every year or so. I don't know, year or 2 years. It's come up many times in the last decade, and it just keeps getting again, the can keeps getting kicked down the road. So there's definitely lots to be concerned about. Despite this sort of aura of a really positive stock market and recovery, I think when you peel back the onion, there's definitely a lot of risks out there.
Yeah, especially there. Now, David, this is not an idea for a Silverfest Halloween costume. That is some scary economic policy. But as we see here, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress that the U.S. economy faced irreparable harm if lawmakers failed to raise or suspend their borrowing cap. Said the nation's debt limit will hit its statutory limit on August 1st, and that it is possible that soon after lawmakers return from their August recess. Now, you got to make sure you get the congressional vacation in. Now, you don't mess with that, obviously. But after vacation time, siesta's over, the United States could face the dire prospect of defaulting on its obligations, which I don't know, maybe you'd think you could stay a little extra and get that resolved rather than going to the Hamptons, but urging Congress to act. She recalled that in 2011, the threat of default caused the nation's credit rating to be downgraded, which I remember quite clearly because I was actually on a vacation, but I was typing away because I thought that was an important issue, that every time, here's another check and balance to make sure the spending doesn't get out of control, and it's just pushed away. I mean, if this isn't going to cap today's spending, will anything ever do it, or is it making silver look like a home run for anyone who has a longer time horizon?
Well, I guess you kind of answered your own question there, Chris, but you would think at some point the market will decide, how much more the United States government can print money, right? Obviously, the way they act at the moment, some people there think that they can do it indefinitely. I mean, that certainly appears to be the case. There's no consequences to expanding the balance sheet, and so they keep doing it. But it is a wider world out there, and a lot of other nations and etc. own this debt, and so I think we'll have to see. But again, this is a massive risk, shorter term, longer term, but I think owning precious metals, and obviously I'm more involved in silver in particular, but I think it has a place in people's portfolio, and certainly it's got a huge place in mine.
Well, I would say so because in my financial adventures, which includes a decade on Wall Street and then a decade in the gold and silver world beyond, I found that it's an often overlooked asset. Most people think, you're just a nut job if you have any interest in it. Then I find that people who've actually learned or have some knowledge of the history view it the way that we do for certain reasons. And with the takeaway from that being, I found that when anyone I've ever met who has any faint grasp even of what the Federal Reserve is actually doing and the corner they're backed into and the reasons that you stated earlier that they can talk about tapering all they want, they're never going to do it for the very obvious reasons that when you stop the cash into a Ponzi scheme, that ends that charade. So I find that the people who actually understand inflation, they buy silver even more so than gold. And David, you talked about market opinions and the differences that are going on. I found this interesting. Here's JP Morgan on the sticky inflation situation. Takeaway, somehow this is dependent on the vaccines. And although inflation is now tracking well above the Fed's 2% target, there's an understatement. I mean, it's doubled that and more. We agree with the Fed that much of this surge is likely transitory. Now, this is interesting coming from JP Morgan, whose own CEO recently said JP Morgan is hoarding cash because a very good chance inflation is here to stay. So you're a business owner, especially interesting because, I mean, what happens? I mean, you're paying a higher input costs. So with all else being equal, if your costs go up, that's a lower margin, less incentive to be out producing silver in a market that already seems dubious on the supply and demand fundamentals. So what are you seeing inflation-wise, David? Is it transitory, do you think?
I don't think the majority is going to be transitory. I mean, perhaps in the inflation index, there are some things that go up and down, like like energy costs. But to say the whole thing is transitory based on a few of those inputs, I think is really stupid and oversimplifies it. The reality is when you start raising people's wages, which you have to do when it's harder to get workers, or maybe when you're in a foreign country and their currency is depreciates and so their pesos or their soles buys less, then they're going to want to raise so they can maintain their standard of living. That's inflation, and you know what? That almost never goes back down. When have you heard of someone's wage getting cut? That might happen a few times in a century, and for a short period of time, maybe a few years, and then it goes back up again. So I don't buy the transitory thing whatsoever.
I hear you. I don't think anyone with common sense or an understanding of what's going on in the economy would, which is fortunately what we do here on the show and explain. I don't know if people wonder, it's not like I just woke up saying this stuff one day, but I was living through Wall Street. I kept seeing how they would say this and it didn't make sense. And it's a lot of unfortunate psychological tricks that are used as weapons against the American public. And again, just as an example, Jim Rickards wrote in his first book about how we're actually simulating exercises of how these things can be used in today's modern war. But fortunately, on the side of the good guys, for people who are looking for silver exposure, I know it's frustrating, price is down yet. So David, before we get to Kuya, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
My guess, now I'm of the school of thought, and let's see how we should phrase this. I'm becoming more and more confident that when this nonsense has been resolved, the price of silver will be something quite stunning. I won't put a number on it here, but the more that I just think about this, see Bitcoin up 320x in the last 8 years, all the other things that are happening, I think the number is going to be big enough that, would you say that the same people who are, and I'm included in this, they get frustrated sometimes when the price is down, that based on how this all has to resolve, are we going to be the same ones that once the price is substantially higher saying, I wish I had had time to buy more? Do you think that will be a common refrain from the same people who are frustrated with manipulation today?
Certainly some people it will. I mean, I think um, we're all humans, and psychology plays a lot into markets and how we buy and sell things. And obviously, if if the silver price goes up, 4 or 5x over the next period of time, which I think is totally possible. People are going to be, some people are going to be, almost nobody will be probably satisfied. Will be satisfied, I should say. With everyone will say I should have bought more back when it was lower. It's just the way we are wired as humans. I mean, if you can take some of the emotion out of it and just buy every week or every month or whatever, you'll probably sort of get a better dollar cost average return on your investment, and you'll even out the ups and downs over that period of time. So whether you're buying a stock or silver, physical silver, I would recommend that you look into that strategy. And with transaction costs being so low now for stocks in particular, I think it's a good call. But personally, but yeah, I mean that's it's a good question. I think fortunately, I'm a big shareholder of a silver mining company. I think I do own some physical silver as well, but that my majority of my bet on silver is in the mining company. So I think I'll be very, very happy when the silver price goes up. But we could always do better, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something in there, and I try to apply this to myself of not. I think we've been conditioned to always think what needs to be done next, and I think it's useful. Anyone who's watching this or is in silver, I think it's worth pointing out we've already all come a long way. The price will go when it goes. I find more it's a good exercise just to change our perspectives. Now, I think I've mentioned this on the show a couple of times before, but I was working on Wall Street, and then the years between leaving in 2012 and now, it took me a while to figure out the entrepreneurial side. So there are times where I was going into debt to figure out how to get my business up and running. There were times where I was all in on silver and where it would have been helpful to have a big move, yet that's the way I look at it now. Sure. Am I going to be excited when it finally moves? Yes. But on the positive, it's like, well, this is great. I can buy shares of companies that I think, especially when maybe the one difference I would say from you, David, you mentioned 4 or 5 times the price. I believe once this is resolved, it's going to be well beyond that. And so we'll see.
Yeah.
And which we're human. So we want to see things happen, but I got an email this morning or yesterday from someone who was upset, the price of their silver stock they bought got absolutely hammered. And I would just say, I don't really care about the price. The day that the manipulation is resolved, then the price is going to be mind-boggling, is my guess. And I figure that's really just the best I can do with making the most of the current situation, not as I think it should be or as I want, but just as it is today, and staying present and focused with what we can actually make decisions about. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, I don't try to, I guess, force any investment strategy on anyone. But for me personally, I'm a long-term investor, and by long-term, I mean multi-years, 3, 5 plus. So, day-to-day price fluctuations don't bother me. But I know for a lot of people it can, and I think but you made a good point earlier, Chris, which is that if you've got the conviction, you own a good company, it's well managed, where you can ask the executives to basically manage, be stewards of capital on your behalf, then you kind of don't have to worry about what the price is today. Just let them do their job. And in a few years, and when the silver price goes to that new reset level or whatever you want to call it, those shares will be worth much more than they are today.
And I actually do like calling it the reset level. I think that's going to occur. I would still bet an ounce of silver that 5 years from now, when we look back on this, we do feel that whatever Basel III was the beginning of a new transition. I do believe some form of that is happening now, and it'll be fun to get more details on that as they emerge. Although David, again, I hear a lot of the time people are frustrated with the problems, and they say, okay, well, can we focus on the solutions? And I think silver producing companies are at least one of the financial solutions. And perhaps you could give us an update. I know you had some nice news recently on Kuya Silver. If you could let folks know how everything is going and anything they should be aware of there.
Sure. Well, I mean, in the journey to restart our Bethania mine in Peru, we've been doing some drilling at site, at the in the mostly in the main part of the deposit where the mine the mine that was running up until 2016 is Bethania. So we were drilling at depth there, to extend the veins at depth. We were successful in doing that. And then we also intercepted some wider widths than we ever expected. The widest intercept from underground sampling we ever had was 1.7 meters, and we got up to 6.7 meters in drill length, which I think was 5 and change meters true width on one zone that we hit. So much wider than we've ever seen underground, and which obviously that's great to see. And then finally we also were hitting a lot of new veins. So on the way to the target, on the veins that we know about that have been mined, we were kind of successful in hitting some new veins, extending some structures that were known about but no data on them. They were either mentioned in the report or mapped at surface or whatever. We were able to extend those quite a bit. So we went from 6 known veins to with significant data on them to now 20 in the main mine area, and so that was very positive in terms of building potential for the future here with the mine. And of course we've got the area to the east. We got some good hits on as well, that we can work on in the next program, which we're calling the Hilltop Zone, that we reported on earlier in the year when we did our first ever surface sampling there. And then we've got our Carmelita deposit that we bought a couple months ago, and it from a surface overprint kind of point of view looks very similar to Bethania. The veins we can map at surface for at least 1 kilometer. And so the potential to have essentially another Bethania that's only 3 kilometers away that could feed into our mill that we're permitting to build would be very, very attractive for our company. And in terms of solving the world's problems, well, at least we will be producing silver, meaningful amount of silver, when we can restart the mine and have our own mill there for the first time ever. And obviously, we want to contribute positively to our local community and to Peru, and that's part of being a good mining company and a good steward.
Well, I appreciate that, David, and I think that's one of the things that's nice in today's age where information spreads quickly. That the companies that do things well and do them right, I think, make themselves clear. And David, perhaps just in wrapping up, you can let folks know if they have questions, if they want to get in contact, what is the best way to do that?
Well, you can contact us on our website, www.kuyasilver.com, KUYA silver.com. And you've got the contact page up there, Chris. That's a good place to start. And you can request a meeting. You can also find all of our social media that we're active on, and you can get the quick updates that way. We're obviously we are very we like hearing from our shareholders and anyone interested in the company. So by all means, give us a shout.
Well, I sure appreciate that, David. And thanks for checking in on the Fed news and the Kuya news. And folks at home, go ahead and hit that share button if you think this is a perspective that others in the mainstream should be aware of. So thanks again, David. And we'll look forward to checking back in with you again soon.
Thanks, Chris.